Hello everyone, Religious Fanboy here again. This is a late video, but this is gonna be a sort of sermon type thing. Um, just talking about story of Pentecost and referencing a race a bit. Um, and talking about how the idea of how God will call us to difficult things even though we do not see it at the time and in the moment. um God is does work all things work things to be good. um that doesn't mean that you don't have free will and that this world doesn't is absent of corruption, but does mean that God has the authority, power, and desire to make even the worst parts of the world and ourselves and our inconveniences to and use them and take advantage of these things to do great things. And as we will see in the story of Pentecost, in Acts chapter 2, that God uses things that we do not understand and and creates outcomes that we are unable of seeing them as being possible to show his authority and power and love. One of the things, much like what we hear when we read John 3:16, is important when we teach about God's grace to also teach about the reason for why we need God's grace in order to understand the intentions of that grace. Um, Now, unlike how we would talk about first the fall in Genesis chapter 3 and talking as a way of beginning to understand the reason for why Jesus died on the cross, but if it wasn't for the concept of people speaking different languages, as talked about in the Tower of Babel, which I will read the story of now. In This is the ESV in Genesis chapter 11. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had bricks of stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, Behold, they are one people, they have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do, and nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off the building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth. This is considered to be a very confusing passage because we don't know. We aren't, besides the alluding to possibly more disastrous um, actions being done by the people, we aren't really given much of a reason for why God did what he did in the people to the people building the Tower of Babel. Unlike most of the punishments in early Genesis, this one also does not allude to any direct punishment or threat of death within the narrative. Um, sorry, that was almost a burp, but it wasn't a burp. Sorry. Oh, but much, but much like the story of Gideon, where God would continue to decrease the number of Gideon's men that would attack uh, while being led by Gideon in order to reclaim the nation of Israel. We are able to see in Pentecost how God used what was an obstacle and a disadvantage, or at least to us perceived as a disadvantage, as a way of showing into set in order to set up a circumstance that shows God's power and love. This is shown in Acts chapter 2 through the miracle done by the Holy Spirit as the disciples speak to crowds of many different tongues and places. Much like when God approached Gideon while he was hiding in the wine press, the Holy Spirit on the day of Pentecost arrived. I'm gonna start reading this chapter now. Starting in reading in Acts chapter 2. When the day of Pentecost arrived, they were all together in one place, and suddenly there came from a heaven sound like a mighty rushing wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. And and divided tongues as of fire appeared to them and rested on each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began speaking and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. Now there were dwelling in Jerusalem Jews, devout men from every nation under heaven, and at this sound the multitude came together, and they were bewildered because each one was hearing them speak in his own language, and they were amazed and astonished, saying, "Are not all these who are speaking Galatians? And how is it that we hear each of us in his own native language? Parthians, Medes, Amalekites, and the residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus, and Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, and the parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and the visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabians. We hear them telling in our own tongues the mighty works of God." And all were amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, "What does this mean?" But others mocking said they were filled with new wine. This in these verses we read, I'm gonna summarize the rest. But we see how the Holy Spirit and God used the message of the disciples, the message given to the disciples and their ability and God's power over language as seen in this passage and in Tower of Babel to save many people. And we also see how even in the miracles we are still able to appreciate and be grateful for them, even though there will be times where they will be ridiculed and questioned and misinterpreted. And this is a reminder that God was, this can be a reminder to us that Jesus was ridiculed and the apostles were ridiculed and persecuted. And we are able to see the importance, benefits of remaining faithful and trusting in God, regardless of the situation and our status within our circumstances. We also see how uncomfortable situations are able to help people grow in the way that these lessons and themes are paralleled throughout the series of Erased, where how Satoru was afraid to look into himself and that genuine relationship with those who appeared to be his friends, and he that wanted to be friends with him and help him. And through his attempts to save people throughout the show, we are able to see him grow as a person, overcoming his feelings of guilt and his personal obstacles, as well as learning how to have greater sense of compassion for others and a willingness to and the creation of a habit of being more open with those who love and care about him. And happy Pentecost. I don't remember the original, um, the Jewish meaning behind the holiday. I think it is something to do with Moses and the discovery of Israel. Um, I highly recommend. I will be searching for videos and resources, and I will add them in the description to this video as I find them. But with that being said, see you guys Tuesday for the lesson video for episode 5. I think Token Ranbu Hanamaru Season 1. And I hope and pray that you took away from this video whatever God intended for you to take away from it. And with that being said, may God be with you, and I will see you next time. Bye.